Hello and welcome to Nerd Parish, a show where I discuss two stories, one from the Bible and one not, and discuss how those emotional beats are similar between the two. In this cast, I will discuss the overarching arc of Star Wars, specifically the relationship between Vader and Luke, and then also discuss the story of Hosea and Gomer from the book of Hosea in the Bible. The first story that I want to talk about is that story of Hosea and Gomer. I asked that you work with me a little bit because really I'm extrapolating off of probably like 8 or 9 verses. But the narrative ideas are so strong and so central to the core theme of the gospel that I believe that it's important and worthwhile for us to discuss this. So Hosea comes from a fairly unimportant family. There's not too much known about his father, Beeri. It doesn't give us a tribe. It really gives us nothing. We are led to believe that he's in the nation of Israel because most of the prophecies that he speaks are specifically about the kingdom of Israel as opposed to the kingdom of Judah. But that's really all we get. So he comes from this unimportant family and he's called to be a prophet. He's called to be the connection between God and the kingdom of Israel. And Israel's currently in dire straits, so it's a very important position. It's a position in which if he's successful at, if the people of Israel listen to him, he'll be essentially saving the kingdom. So this is awesome. So Hosea gets called to be a prophet. And early on in his ministry, God comes to him and says, I want you to marry a prostitute. Which Hosea, I think, would probably be a little bit surprised at. There's specifically laws against marrying a prostitute, but hey, this is coming from God, so we'll listen to that, I guess. And so he goes and he finds a woman, Gomer, and he marries her. And at first, things are going fairly well. Gomer conceives a son, and God comes to Hosea once again and says, name that child Jezreel. Now, Jezreel is a name that's fraught with meaning, and I really see that everyone in Israel would know it. So, the current king over Hosea's name is Jeroboam II, and his grandfather's name was Jehu. Now, Jehu lived during the time of King Ahab, and Ahab was a horrible, ruinous king in essentially every respect. They turned away from God and started worshiping Baal, and they were engaging in human sacrifice, and every really bad thing that you could come up with, Ahab was doing, pretty much. And so God speaks through prophets to Jehu and says, hey, you're going to supplant the kingdom of Ahab. You're going to tear them down. And so Jehu's like, all right. And he gathers together the people who are around him and he starts conquering and he defeats the army of Ahab and another king. And then after he defeats that army, he goes to the town of Jezreel. And at first, he notes that Jezebel, Ahab's wife, is there, and he calls to the town and says, give me Jezebel. Give me Jezebel. And Jezebel looks out from the window and is like, no, I don't want to come out to see you. You just killed my husband. That doesn't seem like a fun idea at all. And so then Jehu looks up to the towers and says, who among that town are with me? Who's on my side? And a couple of eunuchs are like, hey, we're on your side. You seem like a good guy, and this Jezebel is not a really nice person, and Ahab wasn't a good person either. And so Jehu tells the eunuchs to toss Jezebel down, and so Jezebel falls down from the tower, and she splatters all over. And then Jehu decides to go for lunch and dinner. And so he just leaves and, has his meals. And at the end of dinner, he thinks, there's probably a mess at the bottom of that castle. I should probably, clean it up. And so he sends his servants to go clean up the mess, and they find that, dogs are chewing on the bones and all the blood and viscera is all cleaned up. Which was a fulfillment of prophecy, so yay for that. And then he thinks, there are other people in the kingdom besides just Ahab and Jezebel who I don't like and who I'd prefer not to continue. And he recognizes that Ahab had 70 sons and lots of friends and relatives, and so he thinks to himself and he goes back to the town of Jezreel and says, hey, you need to give me Ahab's 70 children, and you need to give me all of his friends and relatives and all of those people so I can get rid of them. And the town thinks to themselves, and they realize that Jehu had just defeated two armies, and so they're like, we're not equipped to really fight that. And so they just kill Ahab's 70 sons and give the bodies over to Jehu. Which was what happened. They killed Ahab's 70 children. They killed and then Jehu proceeded to kill all of Ahab's friends and relatives and advisors and everyone who was at all related to the regime. Now, I think it's important to recognize that this probably was not an unusual practice during this period of time. If you're going to overthrow a monarchy, you want to make sure that all of the people who might challenge your power after you've completed your revolution are eliminated. And so really that's what Jehu does. But this is also a very bloody execution ring. And that's the name that Hosea decides to give his child, or that God tells Hosea to give his child. I personally think that the closest modern interpretation is probably naming your child Auschwitz today, which admittedly Auschwitz was on a much larger scale, but we're still talking about a place of indiscriminate slaughter. A slaughter of a people not due to who they are, but due to who they're associated with. Um, so Hosea names his first child the equivalent of Auschwitz. At which point, Gomer, time goes on a little bit, and Gomer has a second child, a daughter, who's probably not Hosea's. At this point, Gomer has decided that she doesn't entirely love being a wife to Hosea and is gonna, move out a little bit. And so they have a child, and God comes to Hosea again and says, I want you to name your child not loved or not forgiven, because I'm not going to forgive Israel. This is a very sad name for a child, but Lo Ruhama, or not loved, is what the second child is named. And time goes on. Presumably the relationship gets a little bit worse. And the last child, the third child comes, also almost certainly not Hosea's. And we name this child Lo Ami, which means not mine, or illegitimate, really. The child is literally just named for the fact that this conception was outside of wedlock. We're just going to call him not mine, so everyone will know. And this is also really sad, I think, for the child. But it's a representation of what was happening with the mother. And so Hosea continues to raise the children, and over time, Gomer just leaves. She goes away. She finds a new place and decides that this domestic life just isn't working out for her. So time goes on, and eventually Hosea is raising 3 children alone, 2 of them almost certainly not his. And God comes back to him and says, hey, I need you to go find and love your wife again. And Hosea is a little confused because he had done the best he could. He loved his wife. He cared for her. He honored her, and she left him. And so Hosea's like, it's done. It's over. I'm good. But God's like, no, I need you to go love your wife again. And so Hosea goes out and tries to find Gomer. I mean, he hasn't heard from her. He doesn't know what's happening in her life. And he thinks, what would Gomer go back to? She's not with her parents any longer. Where could she be? And so he goes looking for her. And at first he doesn't see her. She's not in the merchant district. She didn't open up a shop or anything. You know, she's not with the widows or anything like that. And eventually he goes down to the dark alleys, you know, those places where respectable people don't go, let alone a prophet of God. I mean, Hosea is speaking for the voice of God, and he's going down into the dark alleys. He's going down into the drug houses. And eventually he finds one of the prostitution rings, and he finds his wife. And he's like, hey, I know her. Honey, come with me. At which point someone steps forward, a man steps forward and says, you can't have her. What do you think you're doing? She costs. And Hosea's like, what do you mean she costs? That one was my wife. And the guy's like, I don't care who you think you are. You know, she's a slave, and if you want her for the night or at all, then you have to pay. At which point Hosea pulls out the money and says, how much? What's the cost for my wife? And so they agree between him and essentially the pimp. They agree on a price, 15 shekels, along with some barley and some wine. And Hosea takes back his wife, and they walk into the house, and I can't imagine what conversation or what the emotional impact of that would have been for Gomer to have left this man's household after stepping out on him multiple times, and to have him rebuy your freedom, to have him come back to you and say, I know that what you were rescued from was prostitution. That first time that I married you, and you left with 3 children. You left me with 3 kids, and now I need to come back to you and save you again. And Hosea tells her basically that I need you to remain faithful to me, and I will remain faithful to you. And there's going to be a period of time in which there will be no sex. And that period of time is really important, I think, just because Gomer's life had been dominated by sex. Gomer, before the time in which she was with Hosea, her life was dominated by sex. And the trial of their marriage, those 2 children that were not Hosea's, are a period of time in which Gomer's life is dominated by sex. Presumably, she's trying to keep the secret. And she's now been and then she experienced being sold into prostitution. Not just doing it of her own will or taking the occasional man, but she's now property. And so having Hosea say, let's take that off the table, and I want you to know that I love you. I want you to know that I respect you as a person, and that I will be faithful to you even without that on the table, I think is tremendously, tremendously powerful. This part of the story that I want to focus on in particular is the fact that Gomer is in fact a passive agent in this story, or in the story of Hosea and Gomer's love. Gomer doesn't earn Hosea's love in any way. Gomer is not faithful. I fully believe that she had many wonderful qualities, but the story doesn't give us her wonderful qualities. It doesn't tell us about how she had a sparkling laugh, or, you know, the way in which she could light up a room. It just gives us that she exists and that she's Hosea's wife. And for Hosea, that's enough. For Hosea, that's enough for him to take care of these 3 children. For Hosea, that's enough for him to pay the cost to rebuy his wife. For Hosea, that's enough for him to not divorce her. For Hosea, the fact that she is his wife is enough to justify this entire endeavor. But at no point in time do we see Gomer earning that. At no point in time do we see Gomer being worthy of the sacrifice or of the heartache. And Gomer's not condemned for not being worthy of the sacrifice of the heartache. We understand that Gomer is struggling. We understand that Gomer is unfaithful. And yet, Hosea loves her anyway. And this is painted very directly as a metaphor between God and Israel, and I believe between God and the church. That we're not called to see them as separate. Okay, cool. So the second story that I want to talk about is the story of Star Wars, specifically the story of Luke and Darth Vader. In this, I'll definitely be spoiling the first trilogy, the original ones. But they came out 30 years ago and are one of the most famous properties on the planet, so I don't feel too bad about that. That being said, I'll be splicing the story together to really cohere it around that particular father-son relationship and playing with as few characters as possible. So we begin the story with Luke, who grew up on the desert planet of Tatooine. He grew up under the care of his aunt and uncle, who were very different people from him, with his uncle constantly trying to tell him to slow down, to be more careful, and in private moments saying that he's too much like his father, who is implied to have had a bad end. When Luke is traveling the planet, he's attacked by sand raiders, who are scared off by an old hermit who lives in the hills. This hermit's name is Obi-Wan or Ben, but for the sake of this, we're just going to say Obi-Wan. And Obi-Wan tells him that his father was a great Jedi who died during the Clone Wars, by being killed by Darth Vader. Luke's family is then killed, and without a home to go back to, Luke chooses to become a Jedi like his father. Obi-Wan and Luke find themselves resisting the Empire, a monolithic evil government that's building weapons to destroy planets and is responsible for countless suffering around the galaxy. And Obi-Wan in particular goes on to fight Darth Vader, who used to be his former apprentice. And in Luke's sight, Darth Vader strikes Obi-Wan down, killing him. Luke then leaves, feeling grief at the loss of a second father figure. Luke proceeds to go to Dagobah, a swamp planet, and meets Yoda. He at first doesn't realize who Yoda is and becomes impatient at the delays, asking why he has to wait. Why can't they go meet Yoda now? Yoda asks why he must become a Jedi, and Luke says it's because of his father, who, it must be remembered, Luke has never met. Luke has only heard, really, one story of his father being a Jedi, and that's enough to make him want to model his entire life after this. Yoda says to Obi-Wan's ghost that he can't train Luke. Luke is too much like his father, with no patience and a lot of anger. But after some back and forth, Yoda is convinced by Obi-Wan's Force Ghost to train Luke, and chooses to do so. During his training, Luke has a vision that his friends are in danger. Yoda and Obi-Wan's ghost both tell him he cannot go. He has not finished his training. He's not ready. Obi-Wan suggests that it's a trap, and he would follow the dark side. Luke chooses to go anyway, and is confronted by Darth Vader. He's asked to join the dark side, and Luke refusing, saying that Vader murdered his father. At which point, Vader counters with one of the most iconic lines of Star Wars, saying that, "I am your father." And he then says that Luke knows this to be true, that if he searches his feelings, this is something that he's always known. Luke escapes and proceeds to find Yoda, who's dying, and Obi-Wan's ghost. And Luke confirms the truth of this, that Darth Vader is his father. And he angrily asks Obi-Wan why Obi-Wan would lie to him. Why did you say my father was dead if he's not? He's the person who killed you. At which point, Obi-Wan says that from a certain point of view, Vader did indeed kill your father. That when Anakin turned to the dark side, Anakin, Luke's father, when Anakin turned to the dark side, that the man who he used to be died, and a new man rose in his place, and so he views this as the truth. At which point Luke says that I can't fight my father, I can't kill him. And Obi-Wan sadly says that the Empire has already won, if that's the case. Luke tells Obi-Wan's ghost that there's still good in Anakin, and that he just has to find it. Luke then proceeds to surrender to the Emperor, in this scene.
This is a rebel that surrendered to us. Although he denies it, I believe there may be more of them, and I request permission to conduct a further search of the area. He was armed only with this.
Good work, Commander. Leave us. Conduct your search and bring his companions to me.
Yes, my lord.
The Emperor has been expecting you.
I know, Father.
So, you have accepted the truth.
I've accepted the truth that you were once Anakin Skywalker, my father.
That name no longer has any meaning for me.
It is the name of your true self you've only forgotten. I know there is good in you. The Emperor hasn't driven it from you fully. That was why you couldn't destroy me. That's why you won't bring me to your Emperor now.
I see you have constructed a new lightsaber. Your skills are complete. Indeed, you are powerful, as the Emperor has foreseen.
Come with me.
Obi-Wan once thought as you do. You don't know the power of the dark side. I must obey my master.
I will not turn, and you'll be forced to kill me.
If that is your destiny.
Search your feelings, Father. You can't do this. I feel the conflict within you. Let go of your hate.
It is too late for me, son. The Emperor will show you the true nature of the Force. He is your master now.
Then my father is truly dead.
When Luke proceeds to go find the Emperor, at first the Emperor tries to convince him to turn to the dark side, and Luke says, "No, I will not do that." And then the Emperor has Luke and Darth Vader fight, at which point Luke establishes that he's equal to Vader, and then says that, "No, I will not fight you," and begins to fight a defensive fight, running away rather than offensively attacking. At which point, then Darth Vader recognizes that Luke is trying to hide and goads Luke into fighting, talking about how he has a sister, and I'll show you that scene as well.
So, you have a twin sister. Your feelings have now betrayed her too. Obi-Wan was wise to hide her from me. Now his failure is complete. If you will not turn to the dark side, then perhaps she will.
has made you powerful. Now, fulfill your destiny and take your father's place at my side.
Never. I'll never turn to the dark side. You failed, Your Highness. I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
Immediately after this, the Emperor, realizing that Luke's not going to turn to the dark side, that Luke has chosen to stay on the light, the Emperor becomes enraged and starts using Force Lightning on Luke and essentially torturing him. At which point Vader sees the pain that his son is undergoing and chooses to confront the Emperor and throws him down a shaft, electrocuting himself in the process and proceeding to die, finally having been redeemed. This story, I think, echoes my earlier story of Hosea and Gomer, because in almost no way is Luke ever confirmed until the very, very end. Luke's assertion that there's still good in Anakin, that Anakin still exists as a discrete entity apart from Darth Vader, at no point does that ever receive confirmation. Luke states that he's able to feel the conflict within him, but every choice that Darth Vader is given, he chooses the dark. In that first scene that I showed, Luke says that the good in you is the reason why you won't give me over to the Emperor. And he is given to the Emperor. Darth Vader had already killed one of his mentors and arguably his other father figure. He's known throughout the galaxy as being a dangerous, ruthless, evil being. Really, and all that Luke has to go off of in terms of him being a positive role model was this very short story that Obi-Wan says about your father was a great Jedi who Darth Vader killed. That's basically all he gets. And Luke creates this enormous idea that there's good in Vader if only he will give into it. And Luke stands by this repeatedly. When he refuses to fight Darth Vader, when he refuses to kill Darth Vader, when he surrenders himself in the first place. And while it's ultimately justified, it's still a blind, unreasoning love that Luke evidences. Luke's not showing love due to who the person is. He's not showing love due to who Vader is, but he's showing love due to the fact that Vader's his father, and that's really all Luke needs to know. And I think that we can definitely see this parallel there, of not even someone being unworthy of the love, but worthiness is not in the cards. No, never do they ask why you're not worthy or why you're there. But instead, they just simply act as though, of course I love you, because, in Hosea's case, because Gomer's my wife, and in Luke's case, because Vader's my father. I just want to say thank you for listening. If you happen to see this on the YouTube channel, please do leave a comment in the comments below. If not, I think actually that's still probably the easiest way to reach me, though you can also reach me on Twitter at NerdParish, or on the YouTube channel at NerdParish, or at nerdparish.com. Leave a comment on any of those places, and I'll absolutely see it, and I'd love to speak with you. Thank you very much. If you have any other ideas in terms of what you'd like to see, please do let me know. Have a great night.